She saw the blasphemer, silhouetted against the wall of dragon fire, and her dream sprang to life around her. He was a towering figure in blood-spattered plate armor, twisting horns rising above his fiendish visage. A long tail snaked out behind him as he strode towards her, behind the last remnants of his personal defenders. He spoke, and his voice rang in her ears above the din of battle.
So here is the one they are calling Dragonslayer, the bearer of Barak Radam.
He pointed his own curved sword at her, and she felt a twinge of fear.
Destroy her,
he shouted, and the barbarians around him roared in fury as they surged ahead. As we enter the library of Korranburg today, we're reopening a recently reshelved book on Tieflings. After the Tieflings episode of the Core Races series, I left a few pages of the script on the cutting room floor. Not because it wasn't going to be useful material, but because I needed to bring that video's length down. What I was going to cover was information on Tiefling NPCs and other characters mentioned in the setting. The goal of this video is to give you information on pre-existing Tiefling characters that you might be able to drop into your game. There are characters from adventure and novel sources, which are, of course, semi-canonical at best, existing as basically alternative reality versions of Eberron. Though that doesn't mean that you can't use these characters from those sources in your own game. I will use terms and reference people and places mentioned in the previous Core Races video, and won't be giving you a direct explanation of each of them, so I recommend you watch that first before continuing with this one. A link to it is in the description, and with the little I in the corner now. Before we get going, I do want to mention that these sections could potentially contain spoilers for novels, adventures, and or other general NPCs your DMs might wish to use. So if you're reading The Legacy of Canon, or the Draconic Prophecies trilogies of novels, or just playing in an Eberron game and come across a named character that sounds familiar to you, I recommend pausing and skipping ahead to the next chapter so you don't ruin anything that they might have planned. I will start off each section with the book or books that the character is from originally to help with that. Tieflings are relatively rare to find in adventures, and only a few named NPCs have cropped up in the many Eberron publications. The occasional Tiefling shows up in adventures completely unnamed. The earliest example of this are a few enforcers of a Rakshasa in the Dungeon 143 adventure Riding the Rail. No information is given about their origin or history, and none of them are named. And they're minimally key to the plot. 2 Zendrick Expedition adventures feature unnamed Tieflings. If you're not familiar with this type of adventure, I gave a detailed explanation in Monster Manual A to Z episode on Aarakocra and Aboleth. A link to that explanation is in the description. A trio of so-called Tiefling schemers attacked after an important bit of exposition from an NPC in the 5th Covenant of Light adventure called Things Fall Apart. The schemers are members of the rival faction, the Cabal of Shadows. No information is given about their origin, so they could easily have been from any race. Though the Cabal often served outsiders like Tieflings, so they make sense. In the first Crimson Codex adventure, Prophecy's unwitting servant, A small group of Tieflings are hired by the Lords of Dust to watch a business establishment the players will need to visit, and to attack them. In this case, the adventure does specify that they are not loyal to the Lords of Dust faction, or any other group specifically, so it makes them less likely to be Sokka Tieflings, but nothing else is really detailed. There's an Emerald Claw Assassin who is a Tiefling in the Seekers of the Ashen Crown, but again, no name or backstory is given. So we don't know if this is a singular planar Tiefling who grew up under the Blood of Vault religion, a Kalunian who had abandoned the domain, seeking the claw as a better source of power, or what. This character had a lot of potential, but instead was mostly squandered and became a pretty disposable enemy. The first major named NPC in an adventure is a burglar named Six-Fingered Jinn in the Zendrick Expedition's adventure called the Sahuagin Stone. Jinn is a distrusting orphan from Stormreach and has an unusual physical form even for a Tiefling, suggesting that he is a planar Tiefling but not connected to any of the planes that are common planar power sources for planar Tieflings. Perhaps Lamania due to his gills and six-fingered webbed hands, being more animalistic than fiendish. In the adventure, Jinn has information that really instigates the plot of the adventure and is being held before being forced to fight as a gladiator in the Red Ring. Jinn might be an interesting contact for you to use in a Stormreach-based game, as he is a criminal but not directly tied to any of the established gangs. In fact, many of those criminals don't particularly like him. He often eschews using regular fences, trying to go it alone, selling his ill-gotten wares. As someone operating from the outside, he could be a neutral guide to the underworld of Stormreach, to some newly arrived adventurers. Okay, that is it for Tiefling characters pulled from adventures. Now to look at ones from Canon game materials. One of the most important Tiefling NPCs you may use is Lord Bal Molesh of the Venom Lords. Not much has been written about his appearance or personality, so that's going to be up to the individual DM. But he has close ties to Sora Katra and the rest of the daughters of Sora Kel, so he can be brought into a storyline involving them quite easily, or vice versa, involving him can expand out to the daughters. He is a warlock and leader of the Venom Lords, and thus the whole venomous domain. But beyond that, we don't know much about him. So again, it's up to you as a DM. You're quite free to fit him into a campaign involving a lot of different groups and peoples in the west of Corvair. Or, since he is a warlock of much power, with access to knowledge going back to Orkaloon, he can be a potential source of rare information and magics, even if your campaign doesn't otherwise use any of the other concepts around him, much before or after the players interact with him and the other Venom Lords. There will potentially be more about Bal in the upcoming Frontiers of Eberron Threshold, as it does deal with the general region, the Relish Dromite border, but Keith Baker hasn't said anything specific about that yet. An interesting NPC is Tolri, who is a member of the Relish anti-monarchists known as the Swords of Liberty. She's a Tiefling wizard and is known, infamously in certain circles, for crafting explosive magics used in the terrorist activities the organization embarks on. She currently operates out of Greywall in Droam, with her details found in Dragon number 368 in the Greywall backdrop. The article doesn't detail her origin, so she could well be a Saka, Kalunian, or any other type of tiefling, though by tying her into Breland and Droam, it makes her much more likely that she's either from the Venomous Demesne or a planar tiefling of some sort. She can be dropped into any adventure involving Greywall, the Swords of Liberty, or the Venomous Demesne, especially if you're looking to bridge from one to another of the locations or groups in your game. The NPC we know the most about bridges canon and the semi-canon of the novels, as he appears as the primary antagonist of one of the Eberron books, Dragon War, as part of the Draconic Prophecies trilogy, but was brought into actual Eberron canon in a Dungeon magazine article in issue 169. He is a Saka tiefling called Kathrik Mel, but known by most as the Blasphemer. He's the only tiefling NPC that has been directly illustrated, twice actually, in the Dungeon article and on the cover of the novel. If you're using him in your campaign, he's likely bringing together many usually warring carrion tribes, and may be readying to march out of the demon wastes that will overwhelm the Gashkala and even the defenders of the Five Nations. Maul's goal in the novel is to fulfill the prophecy about the Blasphemer and destroy Gatekeeper seals, bringing about the end of the world as we know it. In the book, he's not successful through the workings of main character Gavin de Lierendar, a powerful dragon-marked Arrow of Storm, among a number of other characters. Tenquis is a Kalunian tiefling artificer of some skill, including knowledge to work difficult metals like Bayashk. He's wry, perceptive, and amiable, but focused on himself. He has a thirst of knowledge about many things, but especially arcane secrets and hidden techniques behind magical artifacts. Tenquis operates out of Rukandral, the capital of Dargoon. He's a recurring and key character to the plot of 2 novels from the Legacy of Dakan series, using his crafting skills to create a false version of a powerful artifact to try to prevent the Lesh from falling prey to its power. You too can use him as they do in the novels, as a powerful arcanist who is not tied to the community he lives in, and do a job and be able to keep something quiet from the locals. Or he could just be a fun, recurring magic shop type store owner in the rough frontier of the Bloody Market. So let's close the book on the Tieflings again here in the Library of Korranburg, having learned about characters from within canon, adventures, and novels. I hope you found an inspiration from one of them and feel like dropping them into your own game, or filing off the serial numbers and using some of their traits for a brand new NPC character. All of these characters have a pretty low power level, with the exception of the Blasphemer and Bal Molesh, so they can all pretty easily get dropped into many ongoing stories at various character levels, without greatly disrupting your game. Next video is going to be about a new D&D book released within the last couple of weeks, as of the time of recording, Mordenkainen's Monsters of the Multiverse. The book has new and updated versions of a number of races, including some that appeared in Eberron Rising from the Last War. I want to see what has changed about them, and a few key monsters, and how that might affect your game in Eberron, and perhaps the future course of D&D 5th edition too. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss it. Eberron Archaeologist is on Instagram and Twitter. We have a feature on Instagram where we show off an Eberron mini every week, usually ones we haven't yet featured in a video. Both accounts post channel news whenever a new video goes live. Links to both are in the video description.